Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk, where we interview and meet with writers and musicians and other people of interesting walks of life. Today, I have with me Kaitlyn Andersen. Kaitlyn, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell everyone where you're from and what it is you do?
Sure thing. I'm Kaitlyn Andersen. I am a writer and I live in Beaverton, Oregon, which is about 15 minutes outside of Portland. I have a book series that I'm currently working on, the first of which has been out and available for sale for almost a year now.
Okay.
I am currently writing sci-fi, but I also enjoy writing horror, writing like fantasy fiction. So right now, this book series is science fiction, but I do have some other genres that I like to throw in there as well.
Oh, that's so exciting. So, you write, obviously, like you said, various genres. What appeals to each one for you? Like you said, you write horror. What in horror appeals to you? What in sci-fi appeals to you?
I've been watching horror movies since I was 3 years old,
Oh wow.
which
Okay.
is not a
Okay.
good idea. I
You
don't
don't
recommend
recommend
it.
it?
I had a grandmother who loved scary movies, and she just introduced them to me at a very young age. And so I've always had a love of horror, and it I could go into like all the subgenres of horror and all the things I like and don't like. But what it comes down to is I really enjoy being scared, and I enjoy, especially right now, there's a lot of horror content out there that's different and new and exciting. And I grew up on like Stephen King. I read Stephen King.
Okay.
I read Goosebumps. Like anything that had a scary edge to it, I just devoured that when I was younger. And for Stephen King, I think I don't know anybody who doesn't like Stephen King, but he has a way of incorporating horror with humanity and
Yeah.
real human issues that it just makes it 10 times scarier than
Yeah.
if you were just reading a book about a ghost. He
Yeah.
just has a way of like this visceral horror that you, on an existential level, are just terrified.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. Like the way you just described it, I think is a good way of that's really appealing the way you described it.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the next question, for everyone watching at home, due to the pandemic, we're doing these interviews online, and the internet connection may be a little not as great on this one, so that's why her video is a little choppy, but the audio is fine. So
I
hopefully,
apologize.
so hope and you're across the country, um, but hopefully the audio is coming through fine for you guys. So what are some of your like favorite horror books that you've read? What like movies that you've watched? Are there any that stand out as you're like that is one of the best?
I started young reading horror, and so one of the first ones that I read was It by Stephen King.
Okay.
The Shining. And those are two that I think if you're kind of coming into it looking for horror books to read, you're diving in with both feet on those two, but they're both really, really good books. Um, there's also a lot of really good horror content out there by Dean Koontz, which is less scary and it's more philosophical in a
Okay.
sense. He's also a fantastic writer. That's a really good place to start. I love scary movies, especially paranormal ones. So, like the Conjuring universe,
Yeah.
Insidious, and then Guillermo del Toro, I really enjoy. He has a movie that's a little lesser known in America called The Orphanage, and it's a Spanish language film, but it
Okay.
is very scary.
Have you encountered any side effects from watching horror movies and reading horror books?
Yeah, the thing is, though, I
Like how you immediately said, "Yeah, of course."
yes, yes. However, the reason I call my Twitter handle Fever Dreams Lit is watching this kind of content and digesting this kind of content. In addition to like, I love sci-fi and I love action, and I have always, as a kid, just vacuumed up all of that information. And a lot of my book ideas come from crazy dreams that I have, which
Okay.
are results of watching all of this stuff and reading all of this stuff. And they're like crazy fever dreams all the time. And a lot of times I get my book ideas from that.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
It's one way to do it.
It's it's definitely a unique way to come up with content. I can say that. So transition into like you write sci-fi. First, what's the appeal to sci-fi? What makes you decide I'm gonna do sci-fi instead of like fantasy?
Sci-fi, well, I will say my book does blend fantasy and
Okay.
sci-fi a little bit,
Okay.
but the thing with sci-fi is it's imagining a future that is possible. Um, and you can do so much with it. And I will say I don't write hard sci-fi. So if
Okay.
you're coming and looking through my book and that's not scientifically correct, it probably isn't. Um, it's more of a space opera, soft
Okay.
sci-fi. Um, I that's not where my knowledge base lies. So I'm more about the characters in the story. And I do have a husband who is the exact opposite, and there has to be scientific evidence behind everything he writes about in sci-fi. So I get a lot of stuff from him.
Okay.
I'll say, "Hey, this makes sense." No, it doesn't. Or sometimes, yes, it does. But more often than not, no, it doesn't.
The Does your love for horror genre blend into your sci-fi writing?
Sometimes, yeah. I think the thing about sci-fi is it's a different type of horror because you're imagining a future, like I said, that's possible. And a lot of times it's a scary future. It's cool and there's
Yeah.
tech and things that make it really interesting. But a lot of times it's it's scary, and not in the same way that scary movies are, but like for example, in my book, it's kind of the darkest side of humanity and
Mm,
it examines that. And to me, that is scary because that is something that we deal with and will continue to deal with.
yeah. And there's something almost more scary about that, right? When you're like, hey, there's a giant squid monster in space, that's scary, but we can just deal with it and move on. But when you're talking about literally the struggle within humanity for goodness,
Yeah.
that's more scary. Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about your book. It's Reliance. Why don't you go ahead, kind of tell people what it's about?
So Reliance is book one of a three-book trilogy. And Reliance follows a main character named Finn, who is a thief in a universe where people are separated into social castes. And so you have kind of like the well-to-dos that live in the inner rings of the planets, and then you have the people who were unfortunately just born into the wrong caste and are kind of separated from society and out on the outer rings. Um, Another big part of the book is that we have alien races and human all living together in these different planets and these different castes. And what happens when you have these two different people together? Sometimes they have babies. And so
Okay.
the main thing of the story is that these hybrids between human and other alien races have some interesting, unique abilities. Um, and they're persecuted by the government because that's a scary thing. And so the main point of the story is Finn ends up on a ship with a bunch of these hybrids, and they kind of are going on these space adventures together. Um, I like to refer to it as X-Men in space.
Okay. Okay. I can see that being awesome. Uh, did this come from one of your fever dreams?
It did, yeah.
Fever
It's a
dreams?
mixture of it's a mixture of a dream and I have such a huge love and respect for Joss Whedon.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s, and so like X-Men cartoons, comic books, and then Joss Whedon content. We had Firefly, we had Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Yeah.
and Firefly. I remember watching it. I think I was like 9 or 10 when it was out on syndication, and I just absolutely loved it. It was a different take on sci-fi for me at that age than I'd ever seen, and he does so well at writing characters and dialogue. And you don't see a lot of other content out there similar to
Sure.
Firefly since then.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so the book was kind of born out of these dreams and ideas that I had, but then also a desire to read a story similar to that, to read a story about these kind of ne'er-do-wells in space and the adventures that they go on with humor and heart and all of the things that I love about Joss Whedon stories.
So even at 10 years old, you were watching this show and thinking, "There's no way this is going to be canceled."
Oh, I was devastated.
so, so yeah. So you write in this world, and you said there's some fantastical elements in it. Is it like the alien hybrids is the fantastical element, or is there kind of more fantasy involved in that? Without giving
The
too many
fact that you have
spoilers.
kind of these superpowers, because
Oh yeah,
these
superpowers. Yeah.
it's based in a little bit of science, but for the most part, you've got these alien hybrids with superpowers kind of running rampant in the universe, and so there's a little bit of fantasy to that is a little less of the science fiction because for the most part, science fiction is grounded in science,
Sure.
um, and
Yeah.
so I do take a little bit of leeway with that and go veer into the fantasy just with the
Sure.
superpowers.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, X-Men in space is already, I think, a good enticing
Right?
line. So, yeah, anyone out there listening, Reliance, Amazon, getting on Amazon.
Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, Audible.
Okay. Yeah, guys, definitely check it out. We are going to keep talking about it, but I just want to make sure that you guys go out there and get this book. Sounds awesome. Um, you said your husband is the opposite of you, where he's hard science.
Yes.
Do you have him review your book and give hard science tips?
Yes.
Okay.
especially just especially with future tech and weaponry and stuff. I mean, he just devours information. He's on every single website there possibly is, every book, just getting information about how things would work
Okay.
scientifically. And so he's a good kind of sounding board for me to say, would this make sense, or how would this work? Because I know how it would work in my mind for like a, but
Yeah.
there has to be some
Yeah.
evidentiary
Of
stuff to
course.
it.
Yeah. The dragons always fly in our mind, whether or not their bodies would be able to do that. Right. What are the conversations like whenever you're like, "Hey, check out this cool chapter," and he reads it and he's like, "This is not how science works." What are those moments
He's
like?
so nice and delicate about it. He's more like, hey, you know that one part, maybe say this instead. Um, like for example, there are some weapons that I use in the book, and even some additional ones that I am using in the second book
Mm-hmm.
that's coming out soon. And just kind of getting his feedback, he'll let me know, well, this is not how the laser would work with physics, and because I don't always think about that kind of stuff. My my writing is so focused on characters and dialogue, and
Okay.
making sure that the audience can connect with them, that those tiny little details sometimes slip past me. So having him look over it and say, actually, this technology would make more sense in this situation, and I never really question him because he knows what he's talking about.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Uh, does the opposite ever happen? Do you ever read his stuff and you're like, "Hey, this is great, but a little too many details."
If it comes down to characters or dialogue, or like anything with the story, I'm a really good sounding board. When it comes to the technology, he is the expert there.
Okay. Do you mess around with any other genres? I think you said you do a little fantasy.
Fantasy, I do horror. I've got some young adult, nothing that's published yet, but I have other books that I've written that
Okay.
once I'm done with this trilogy, I want to get out there. So I have a young adult horror. I have a paranormal romance. I
Okay.
have a straight up horror. It's kind of across the board.
Okay. What? You said you were working on the sequel.
Mhm.
Are there any teasers you can give people about the sequel without giving spoilers, or maybe stuff that may or may not be set in stone, but you kind of want to just mention?
It's true to a lot of sci-fi trilogies. Book two does get a little darker.
You
It's a
said it gets
little
darker.
heavier. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's good. You'll love it. But I think for me, whenever I see trilogies, anywhere, whether it's like the Star Wars trilogies or Lord of the Rings. The second one is always just a little little
Yeah,
heavy. You always kind of leave
yeah.
it feeling like, oh my gosh, what did I just watch?
I think that's true. I'm thinking of all the trilogies, and I think that's pretty
Yeah.
accurate. Um, so your husband's obviously one of your beta readers
Yes.
or alpha reader. I mean, who knows? He's probably reading it like read this paragraph. Um, do you have a group of beta readers? Like, do you have a group of other people who read it and give you comments?
I have friends and family who really enjoy reading it. They don't want to wait to actually see it
Sure. Yeah.
in print, so they want to read it. And then I get so much feedback from them. I've had two really good friends who, from the beginning of the book, when I first started writing the first one, would read chapters for me and give me feedback, and it changed the story so much. I can't tell you how important it is to have beta readers because you just don't always see things outside of what you are wanting to portray. So to get that feedback from other people is so helpful in making the story the best it can be. Because I'm not one of those writers that refuses to make any changes or like is staunch in that. I respect that in other people, but I really want the story to be the best it can be. So as many people who can give me that feedback and help me with that, I will take advantage of it all.
And do you? I mean, that brings a good point because I'm sure you're getting a lot of feedback, you're getting a lot of comments, and you obviously you look at it and you say, I want to make the like you said the best story that I can. Are you
Mhm.
finishing the whole draft before you send out that info, or are you doing it chapter by chapter?
I have one person who will read it chapter by chapter, but I usually just send out the whole draft
Okay.
at once to people so they can read it. And then obviously I have my publisher who also acts as my agent
Sure.
editor,
Yeah.
and so he's more than willing to give me feedback
Who's
on
your
the
publisher?
story. What was that?
Who's your publisher?
My publisher is N Papers Press,
Okay.
and the person who runs it that is my actual publisher is Andrew Zach.
Okay. Cool. Well, great job, Andrew. Um,
Yeah,
how many drafts did you have to do with this book? Because I know a lot of people out there, a lot of people who watch the show are writers, and a lot of them don't like the editing process. I personally enjoy the editing process, but
me too.
kind of understand like you're a published author. For the people who are not published, how many drafts can they expect before they're coming out with a finished product?
Well, the first book, which was actually the first book I ever wrote, so that was kind of my first foray into
Mm-hmm.
sitting down and doing it. It took me 4 years to get it to a place where I actually felt I could shop it around to agents and publishers.
Okay.
And I think in that time, in that 4 years, dozens of drafts. I
Whew.
changed the voice, I changed characters, I changed plot points because when you're diving into your first book, it really is a learning process as you go.
Yeah.
Because I wrote an entire book and I was like, great, I'm done. And then I read through it and I started shopping it around to agents and I would get this feedback. Um, and then it was a huge learning curve for me because I started shopping it out to agents before I even really knew what the process
Yeah.
was.
I think everyone's
And
done
so,
that.
and so, I'd get these denials and they're very honest. They will tell you what they don't like about the book. Um, and it was valuable in the sense that I got a chance to take what they said and
Yeah.
do my own spin on it before I started shopping it out again.
Yeah, I think what you said is really key because I know a lot of people when they're shopping the book, their rejections hurt. I mean, everyone is going to sting you to some extent. Even if you become
Yeah.
hard into it, it's still going to sting a little. But I know that some, I mean, agents are so busy, and I know a lot of them just have an automated response. There's like, hey, I'm sorry, I can only respond to so many. But then other ones, like they do honestly like provide good feedback because they want you to do well.
Yeah.
And so, uh, I think even starting out, like you said, like you're learning to write, you're learning how to edit, you're learning how to take feedback, and I think that's really, really important. So, how many drafts of Reliance did you do?
Reliance had probably at least 12 different
Whew.
drafts just over the span of 4 years, going through and changing so much. Disobedience, however, is different
That's
because
the sequel.
this is the sequel and this was my second I had more experience. I went through the editing process with my publisher. I knew what he was looking for. I knew I had that extra experience of how to present the book. Um, so it happened much quicker. It was difficult though, I will say, because I had 4 years to make Reliance what it was. And then I had less than a year to make Disobedience what it was. It ended up taking longer because I had a pretty complicated pregnancy and a baby amidst all of that. But that's the shortest amount of time I've ever written a book in. It was a huge learning experience for me to be able to produce that amount of content in a short amount of time.
So, Reliance was the first book you ever wrote?
Yes.
The first book you ever wrote, and you got it published.
Yes.
That's incredible. Most
You know,
people never get their first book published. But
it's been a dream come true. It
yeah,
really has.
that's amazing. That's amazing. But I think it's like you said. I think one, you had a good idea, and you stuck with it. But two, like clearly you put in the work over 4 years to make it sellable.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
A
Wow.
lot of trial and error and a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
And there was time in that 4 years where I just stepped away from it and said, okay, maybe this isn't the first book that I write that gets published, and I would start writing other things. But Reliance, partly because it's the first book I ever wrote, but also because the story is just so near and dear to my heart. Like it's my baby, kind of. So
Sure.
I always have gone back to it and
Yeah.
said, no, I really want to get this out there.
So people out there, there's nothing wrong with not publishing your first book.
No,
There's nothing
no.
wrong
And
with
I would like to reiterate that as well. Self-publishing, however you want to do it. Like the thing is, as a writer, you know what makes you happy. You know what fulfills you.
that.
And
Right.
so for some people, it's sticking it out for 10 years to try and get a big press to publish their book. For other people, it's getting their content out there, self-publishing, marketing
Right.
their own stuff on Twitter. And I have so much respect for those people because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard no matter how you do it.
Yeah. It's hard. And it's kind of starting out any venture. I mean, you have to go through the grind to get the payoff at the end. It doesn't matter what it is. Martial arts, learning to play music, learning to write a book. You just have to stick out the grind. You just
And
have
you
to
have
get
to
in there
love
for it.
it.
Yeah, you have to love it.
It's one of those things where if you don't love it, it's really hard to stick with it through all the ups and downs that you're going to experience.
Yeah, I mean, you had 12 drafts of your book, which means you read your book at least 12 times. Like you have to enjoy it.
I read my book so many
Oh,
more
I'm
times
sure.
than that.
I'm sure. So, a lot of did you just query agents until you got one?
So when I started out, I just started querying agents without really a lot of knowledge behind
Sure.
any of it, which is a big mistake. If
Yeah.
you decide that you want to be published and you are going to query agents, do the research first, know what you're doing, because you kind of waste an opportunity reaching out to these people. But yeah, I over the span of a couple of years did a lot of research after those initial rejections of how to write a query letter, how to write a synopsis, how to make your book as marketable as possible to agents.
Mm-hmm.
And I still got denied over and over again. And it was one of those things where I just kept changing, kept adapting. Twitter is another really good resource for writers. There's so many people out there that want to lift and help other writers and
Yeah.
are willing to promote you, give you information. It's a huge resource if you're a writer.
Yeah.
And then eventually I sent it to a publisher just kind of on a whim. And I got an email back that he wanted to set up a phone call and wanted to publish it. And it just kind of steamrolled from there.
And this was Andrew?
This was Andrew, yeah.
That's incredible. How many rejections did you get? Do you know?
Endless. Because I mean, I did try to send no more than 3 queries a day, which is another good piece of advice.
That's good.
Because if you send them all out at once, you don't get a chance to get that feedback and those changes for the next time.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably was rejected by, I don't know, 100. That's just a soft number.
That's something that I've heard is that on average you get rejected 100 times before you get accepted.
Yeah.
Just think,
Because agents in particular, like they really have to love what you're sending them and
yeah,
really feel that it's marketable. And if you don't have that connection with the agent, it's not gonna happen.
right.
That's why doing your research on the agents is so important, because I would find interviews that they did where they specifically were talking about space operas and what they were looking for. And I was able to kind of tell if they were going to even be remotely interested in my story.
Yeah, and I just think like writers in general just don't think about the sheer volume of emails that an agent's getting. If you think you sent out 3 a day and there's 10,000 other authors doing the same thing and there's only
Yep.
so many agents, like they're filling in. So like you have to make your email stand out. You have to make the connection. And it's like you said, like you have to do the work so that you don't look like one of the other 9,000. Like there's something about you that's unique. And then of
Yeah.
course your writing has to be fantastic, right? Um, then I then I want to go back to something else you said. Like on Twitter, I say this all the time, but it's like the one spot on the internet where people are not terrible in the writing community on Twitter. And
Right.
agents, especially on Twitter, like do a pretty good job of answering questions and giving helpful tips because also
Yep.
that's how they make money is getting good books by new authors. So like they want good books. So if you're out there doing the struggle in the grind, it's okay to ask questions. Seek the help you need.
And sometimes that's how they connect with
Yeah,
talent, and that's how they get their content sometimes.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you're living proof that if you stick it out and you put in the
Yeah.
work, you can make it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, first, congratulations. Great job.
Thank
Your
you.
book sounds absolutely fantastic. And I know you said earlier that you are a new mom because you were writing your sequel during the pregnancy.
Yes.
What was that like? Being pregnant and writing the sequel at the same
It was horrible.
time.
I had a really complicated pregnancy. I had
Okay.
like the horrible morning sickness, and then I was hospitalized for 2 months
Oh my
before
goodness.
she was born
I'm sorry.
for preeclampsia, and then she was born premature, so we were in the NICU. So it was a lot, and then on top of that, being pregnant, and it is true, you're super emotional. um I think it changed my writing a little bit, but in a good way.
Okay.
It just allowed me to access my emotions at a deeper level and kind of examine what I was writing from the perspective of someone who now had this other person to take care of.
Okay.
It does kind of change your perspective on how you write, and how you kind of delve into the emotions of the story.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. I'm sorry you were hospitalized for 2 months. That
Thank you.
had to have been terrible. Uh, I spent 3 days in the hospital one time, and that was awful. So I can't imagine 2 months.
Yeah.
Like that sounds terrible. What was the complication? Do you want to talk about it? You don't have to.
Yeah, no, I had preeclampsia, which is really high blood pressure caused by your basically your body rejecting the placenta.
Okay.
So it causes your blood vessels to expand and your blood pressure rises, and it can be dangerous because it can cause seizures and serious health complications for both the mom and the baby. So I was in the hospital on bed rest. So I wasn't really allowed. I was basically in this small room, not allowed to leave or do anything for 2 months. Um, just kind of wondering when my baby was going to be born, because I went in. I was almost 7 months when I went into the hospital. So her having been born at that time would not have been ideal, just because preemies do have a lot
Yeah.
of complications. Um, so for me, I spent 2 months focusing on staying pregnant and
Sure.
just staying as calm as possible, watching a lot of reality television.
Did
Um,
that help you stay calm? Did it?
yeah, watching people just that are just awful. It was an escape from
Sure.
my anxieties and my worries. Just kind of took me out of it for a while.
Yeah, that had to have been a terrifying time.
It was very scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have your baby.
Yes.
How long ago was that?
She was born 6 weeks early on February 4th. So she just turned 4 months.
So really before the pandemic, you have your baby.
Right before the pandemic, yeah.
So you're stuck in the hospital for 2 months. You can't really write. I'm sure you tried to a little bit, but with everything going on in that situation.
Yes, and
And
my publisher was a saint for being patient with me because I couldn't get content to him while I was
yeah.
there.
And then you have your baby, and
Yes.
then the pandemic hits. And first before we get into this, the baby healthy? The baby come out healthy?
Yes,
Okay.
she was small. She was 5 pounds. But since then, she has grown like a little gremlin. It's kind of crazy. She's like 17 pounds now, and she's huge,
Wow.
and she's doing great.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. I'm really
Thank
glad to
you.
hear that she's doing well. So the pandemic hits. So now we're still in the middle of this thing, and
Yes.
you're raising a newborn, an infant, and writing the sequel.
Yes.
What are your days like? What's your days like now?
Yeah. Now we've established a routine, but in the beginning it was really hard because you have this tiny little person that you don't really know yet because
Yeah.
they kind of just send you home with this brand new baby and you have no idea.
Yeah.
I knew a lot about kids before I had a child. I've worked with kids my whole life, but you realize how little you actually know when you're solely responsible for another human life and they're crying and you don't know why. And it was very difficult the first few weeks, especially because with the pandemic we couldn't have help. We couldn't
Yeah.
have people come and watch her. I think maybe the first couple of weeks the pandemic hadn't quite set in, so my mom was able to come. um, but it was just him and I in this tiny apartment, just
Oh
kind
my
of trying to
goodness.
make it work. um, but fortunately he is such an amazing partner and he was able to take her so I could write. The nursery has become my favorite writing room. He'll just kind of sit there with her and I'll try to get as much writing done as I can. And honestly, I'm glad that it all happened the way it did because when I was able to sit down after having her and kind of I wrote a lot of the meat of the story in that time after I had had her. And like I said, it did kind of change the way that I told the story. And I think it's better for it. There's a depth of emotion there that might not have been there had I not had her and gone through all the things that I went through.
That's incredible. That's and you're obviously you still stick it out. You don't have a choice. You're a mother. You have to stick it
Yeah.
out. Like there's no option. But I mean, you seem to be in good spirits about everything. I mean, given the events that you were handed, you
Yes.
seem to be okay, happy.
Well, I like a lot of writers. I'm an introvert, so being quarantined isn't really.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
good.
mean,
It's pretty nice.
it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah,
It doesn't change my life that much. Um, it sucks, but not really having the option to go out. But we're homebodies anyway, and we spend a lot of our free time writing and working on our creative outlets and stuff.
yeah,
So it's kind of ideal for us to be stuck inside.
yeah. What as an introvert, what's it like raising a baby? Because now you're forced to have some extrovert activities, right?
Yes. I mean, it's a little difficult because we don't the only time she really gets to interact with other people is when we go to the pediatrician,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the world that we're living in right now. She can't really be around other people. So she is already an extrovert. She is not like me in that sense. She's not shy at all. She's like her dad. She's really boisterous and she'll
Okay.
smile at strangers. And I think she thinks that everybody she meets just has a mask as a part of their face because she's totally accustomed to it and thinks it's great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but as
Yeah.
an introvert, I think the nice thing is that my husband is an extrovert and I'm an introvert, and there's a balance
Okay.
there. Um, and
Yeah.
hopefully that as she grows older, that works to her advantage. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the terrifying thing of parenthood because you have no idea.
yeah. And it's like you said, you have no idea, and you're learning about someone that you don't know, but they also
Mm-hmm.
don't know who they are.
Yeah.
That's got to be a trying a thing for everyone to learn at the same time.
I think being a parent, when you first become a parent, you go through a little bit of an existential crisis. I don't hear people talk about that a lot, but like it's true. You have a whole, your life changes irrevocably, and you don't really understand the extent of it until you actually have the baby. And it's it's a little terrifying when it sinks in. It's amazing, it's wonderful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I'm very honest about
Yeah.
how hard it is and how terrifying it can be.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks for your honesty. Really, I think you're going to help a lot of people by doing that. What was it? What was it like? What was like the thought? What was going through your mind? What were you feeling like when you were leaving the hospital to come home with her the first time?
I was terrified. I was terrified, especially because she was a preemie and she'd been in the NICU for the first 2 weeks of her life. So she
Gosh.
had round the clock care. She had nurses checking on her constantly. She was hooked up, monitoring her heart and her breathing. And so taking her home after that just felt really weird. I was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure she's okay to come
Yeah.
home?" Because she was
Yeah.
still only a little over 5 pounds at that time, and so it's just this tiny
Gosh,
little
tiny.
person that you're taking home. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying for the first month because every day you're just like, I am responsible for making sure that this person thrives and stays alive. And it's very scary, especially when you're recovering from, like a C-section. I had a C-section, and that's major surgery. It's tough to do that and take care of a baby.
What's the recovery time for a C-section?
They send you home 3 days after a C-section, which
Three
is insane
days.
to me. I get why, but it's insane. To actually
3 days.
feel like yourself again, it can be almost a month.
And you went home with your baby.
I I was very lucky in a way because I was able to go home before she did. So it was really difficult being a mom and not taking my baby home and not being
Yeah.
able to like be with her 24/7. But I was able to rest in a way that other moms who have C-sections don't get to. They get their baby sent home with them after 3 days and they have to make it work.
Gosh.
Moms are superheroes.
Absolutely superheroes. I don't think men can do it.
Oh, no, no. I mean, no offense,
Uh,
but
I
no.
admitted it. None taken. I don't think I could do it. The difference between men and women is fascinating. You
Yes.
guys, you girls, women, do so much feeling terrible a lot of the time. And whenever guys even get remotely sick, we are the most pitiful things in the world.
But actually, I had this conversation with my husband because I have always been of that same mindset where it's like, you guys are such babies. Like,
Yeah.
why are you acting like you're dying right now? But men actually do feel illness differently than women do.
Okay.
Um, Genetically, like when men get sick, it feels different to them than it does when women get sick. And
Okay.
even when you're pregnant with a boy versus a girl, boys are super fragile and they are not as durable as girls are throughout a
Really?
pregnancy. Um, so there is there is a little bit of science behind it. I still think you guys are babies,
Hey,
but you know,
I'll take it. I'm just gonna blame science from here on out.
yeah.
Did you have it? What were some of the weird food cravings that you had?
Because I had the really bad morning sickness, I didn't eat a lot. Like everything made me sick. The
Really?
smell of like meat cooking made me throw up.
Oh my
I
god.
got accustomed to throwing up every single day and then rallying and going to work. But um I think the like one of the only things that I could eat was hot and sour soup
Hot and
from Chinese
sour
food
soup.
restaurants.
Okay. How much hot and sour soup did you eat?
So much. I kept that small business running.
That's very nice of you. So when you're writing, we'll go back to writing a little bit. Um,
Yes.
when you're and you have a newborn, so you're raising her, and I'm sure that's trying on you.
Hmm.
When you're writing and you hit that wall where you're just like I know what needs to come next, but I don't really know what needs to come next. What are you doing to relax, to free your mind, to take a break from that?
A lot of times I will um, read a book or watch a movie or a TV show, because kind of shutting my brain off and taking in someone else's content helps me come up with ideas for my own
Okay.
story. And a lot of times I always sleep on it because, like I said, I'll have dreams, I'll have weird dreams, and I will, however I'm able to do this, I don't know, but I'll be able to pull things from those dreams that make sense in the plot of my story.
Okay.
So there are a lot of things that happen in book two that were pulled from dozens of dreams that I had over the span of a year.
That's crazy. Do you dream every night? Like, do you
I
have
do, and I always remember my dreams.
really?
Yes.
That's mind-boggling to me. I remember like one in 4 months, maybe.
Really?
Oh yeah, I don't remember any of them.
Such a foreign concept to me, because I always have like the most intricate dreams every night, and they're so crazy. And I wake up and I remember them, and I just kind of thread them together to make stories.
Do you write them down?
Yeah, I do.
So you have a dream journal where you're writing down your journal.
Yes, I do.
Do you read it? Like if you're ever stuck, do you flip through it to come up with ideas?
Yep,
Wow.
I did that for book two. Yeah, the huge plot point in book two, which is basically half of the story, was pulled from a dream. Which, going into writing the book, I knew that was going to be a plot point.
Sure.
But going back to that dream and reading the dream journal and kind of remembering details from it really helped writing the story.
That's so interesting. Did you outline the book, or do you kind of have points that you know you want to hit?
So for the first book, I was such a novice to it that I didn't do an outline or anything. I just started writing. And then once I had kind of the skeleton of a book, I went through and filled stuff in.
Yeah.
With book two, I had an outline. Just one of the many things I learned from Twitter and doing research in general, trying to be a better writer. Um, Basically, you're either a plotter or you're a pantser. And a pantser is someone who just dives into it and writes their story, and a plotter is someone who goes through and knows exactly, what moments they want to hit.
Yeah.
And so I was originally a pantser, and I am now a plotter, because it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. My first one, I Discovery wrote it. I was also just learning to write, so I was discovering
Right.
everything that writing was, except for basic grammar that I learned in high school. Uh, and then I outlined my next few that I wrote, and I found outlining made a big difference. There's no right or wrong from what I've learned. I mean, Stephen King
No.
is a famous discovery writer. He doesn't
Yes.
plot anything, but then you have other big name people, yourself, who outline, and it's just a different process, different things for
Yeah.
different people. Whatever gets the book done and in a good quality, that's what we should be. That's what we focus on.
Exactly.
That's that's interesting. You play video games?
I do.
Does that influence your writing? I
Um,
always ask people this, and they're always like, "Ah, no." But
no, that's interesting. The games that I play that I enjoy playing are choice based games.
oh, okay.
So like Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human, Until Dawn, which is a really good choice based horror game. Um, and I think it does kind of influence my writing, because in a way I'm writing when I'm playing a video game, because I'm choosing how
Right.
the story is going to go. I'm choosing how I want to develop the characters. So I do find that when I play those types of video games, they usually end up going a very similar route, and it's how I would write a book.
That's
You
that's
have
really
my
interesting.
husband, and we also watch Call Me Kevin on YouTube. I don't know if you're familiar,
I'm not.
but it's like this chaotic, evil way of playing video games where you just go in and make the worst decisions possible every single time.
Okay.
And that's what my husband does. And I am not like that. I like to tell a story even when I'm playing a video game.
That's so interesting. They really like this is what your mind does.
Yeah.
Do you plan on introducing your daughter to the horror genre at the age of 3?
No, I don't think I don't think I'll start her that early. Who knows how much of my psyche and personality has been influenced by my
Yeah.
introduction to horror at a young age. But I do hope she is interested in it at some point. Um, I really just want her to like what she
Right.
likes, and I'm gonna just be so fascinated by whatever it is because she's got so much to work
Right.
with.
What? She sleep well through the night?
She does, yeah. She sleeps really well. She gets up about once or twice for a bottle, but she's a good sleeper.
Okay. So that means you're getting a decent amount of sleep.
I feel
Decent.
exhausted all the
Do
time,
you?
but I know I am sleeping.
Yeah.
I know factually I am
Yeah,
sleeping.
you're writing down your dreams, right? So.
Yeah. That's how I know I'm
Yeah.
sleeping. But
Right.
as far as how I feel, I do feel exhausted.
All right.
I work full time, in addition to writing and in addition to being a mom. And
Wow.
so I have a full time job as an administrative assistant. And right
Wow.
now we're all working from home. So I watch her, I work, and I also try to
Wow.
write. So that does affect my level of exhaustion as
Wow.
well.
Wow. You're a champion. You are amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone has to say it.
Yeah. Well, you are. Uh, when you were in school, did you excel in the classes that you seem to write about? Like, did you do well in science?
No.
Thanks for your
I
honesty.
I was one of those kids who had to get straight A's, so I worked very hard to excel in all the areas because I was just a perfectionist. Um, but I was not. It didn't come naturally to me. Things like math, things like chemistry, physics. It just didn't come naturally to me. I was all about creative writing, English, history, the creative arts. But as far as the stuff that's actually valuable in your day-to-day life for most people, I just I don't have, my brain doesn't work that way.
did you did you go to college?
I did
What'd you major in?
psychology.
Okay. Okay. Psychology fascinates me. How people think fascinates me.
Me too.
Did you minor in anything, or you just majored in psychology?
I minored in Spanish.
Okay.
I'm fluent in Spanish.
Wow. That's also amazing. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's amazing. Um, yeah. I had a question. It's gone. That's kind of how this thing goes. Is I normally forget my questions. What's a normal day off for you? Like if you're gonna take a day off, like you have the day off from work and you're not going to write. What's a normal day for you?
Um, it's different now that I have a baby because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really feel like a day off.
Yeah.
But for me, it's catching up on sleep. It is. I always try to. It feels weird saying my hobbies are watching movies, but I do find value in watching movies and seeing how stories are being told and how that
Yeah.
continues to change as time goes on. Um, and so that is a hobby of mine. I like to watch new content and see what's out there and what people are reacting to. But I do also, I just, I always have to get my creative side out some way. So if I'm not
Okay.
writing, I do like to draw and create art and play video games, as
Okay.
we know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's you brought up something like this. Is kind of what I tell people before they start writing. Like I encourage everyone to write. You write as much as you can.
Hmm.
But I always tell people like before you do, I want you to know that you're never going to be able to watch a movie the same way because
Yeah.
it changes everything.
Yeah.
And it's hard to watch a movie for me now and not analyze what everything's going on. It takes away some of the joy. There's other joys that come out of it, but it takes away a lot of the joy.
Also trying to predict what's going to happen next kind of
Yeah.
ruins it for you as
Yeah.
well. But my brain always does that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is going to happen.
Yeah, or you like guess the ending 10 minutes in,
Yep.
which is also good foreshadowing. If you were the only one in the room who can guess it, they did foreshadowing pretty well.
Yeah.
What's a normal day like for you now, as an administrator, as a writer? What's like a Monday through Friday normal day?
I'm usually up at 5
5 a.m.
with baby. Uh-huh. And I start work at 7 and I work from 7 to 4 typically on my computer working from home. I have, Zoom meetings that I do and projects that I'm working on for work that I am focusing on while also I have the baby with me all day. And then at 5:30, my husband gets off work. So he takes over for me and takes the baby, and I have a chance to kind of decompress and
Gosh,
usually get on my phone, see what's going on in the world. Um, and then I'm in bed by like 8 o'clock. So I
goodness.
a lot of what I get from for my stories now is less about what I'm able to watch or
Hmm.
do in my free time, and more about a lot of it is just how I'm feeling as a mom and as a partner, and taking all of that and putting it into what I'm writing.
And you obviously have an agent or a publisher who's wanting another book. So,
Yes.
do you have a like a word count that you're trying to get each day? Are you just trying to make progress? Because obviously you have to get the book done. So, how have you divided that up?
I usually my goal every day is to at least write 1,000 words.
Okay.
Um, and that's just kind of I set the bar low so I can continually surprise myself.
Okay. Okay. That's a
that's
good
kind
plan.
of my that's kind of my methodology through life. But I try to do at least 1,000, and then anything over that is great.
Okay.
But as far as writing sci-fi in a total word count, it's at least 90,000 words that you want to get to.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a lot. It's a lot of it's a lot of writing.
It's a lot of
It
words.
doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you're trying to do it under a deadline, it's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. Um, do you take a break between drafts? Do you have anything that you like celebrate? Like, hey, we did it. Let's go out to eat at this restaurant.
Oh, that'd be so nice.
Yeah.
Um, no, I when I finished the draft of this second book and sent it out, um, we didn't, obviously we're in a pandemic, so we
Right.
can't like
Yeah.
go out or anything. But it was more of just a take a deep breath and just do nothing for a minute,
Yeah.
because my brain goes like 70 thoughts per second. Like it just there's so much going on up there that my way of celebrating after finishing this book was just to not do anything, not think
Yeah.
about anything, just kind of take a break, because
How long of a break
it's
did you
kind of
take?
exhausting. What was that?
How long of a break did you take? Like between drafts?
Uh, I took the whole weekend.
Oh, all 2.5 days.
Yeah.
uh, do you? So you said your mind's going nonstop. Do you have trouble falling asleep at night because your mind's
Yes.
going?
Yeah. And one of the things that I am really open about as well with my writing is I'm trying to write stories that people with mental health issues can connect to,
Okay.
people who have anxiety, people who have depression, because a lot of times stories about people with mental health issues, that's all they're about.
Right.
So if you want to read a book about somebody like you, it's usually the main focus is on that.
Right.
Um, Whereas I want to write stories that you want to read, that have fantastical elements, but also have characters who may be going through similar things that you go through. I have post traumatic stress disorder, and I've had it for 4 years now. And it definitely is a huge part in how I write and how I write characters, because I want people who have those similar issues to feel a connection to a character that is a badass and is traveling the galaxy and doing these things while also dealing with a mental health issue.
Yeah. And that's my preference is how you said it. Like, the plot is this. The character happens to have PTSD.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think to me that's the way to do it. And there's nothing wrong if other people want to tell that other story. That's fine. It's your story. You write the story you want to write.
Yeah.
My preference is the cool, fantastical stuff's happening. The character happens to have PTSD. Yeah, you said you were an administrator. Are you a school administrator, or are you just like a company administrator?
I'm an administrative assistant for a bank.
A
So
bank.
I
Okay.
support a group within the bank.
Okay. Um, so when you're sitting down to make a character with some type of illness, some type of flaw, because every character has a flaw, are you drawing
Mhm.
those from your own personal experience? Are you also doing research outside?
Yeah, both. In this book in particular, the main character has PTSD, so I was able to pull a lot of what I know. But as anyone with mental health issues knows, you do a lot of research on what's affecting you. So I have done a lot
Yeah.
of research on PTSD, anxiety, and those types of things. So it's a combination of that wealth of information I found just from other people and from um, learning about the disorder, in addition to like how I deal with it and how it affects me personally. Because, you write what you know. And I do happen to know quite a bit about that living with it. So it's
Yeah.
it's a mixture of both.
That makes perfect sense. And you did say something, and I think there seems to be like some confusion on the write what you know thing, because I've seen
Mm-hmm.
people online say people say to write what you know, but I don't know very much stuff. Like I can't relate to being a blacksmith. Well, like then you do research and you find out what their lives are like. Then you know
Yeah.
about it, and then you can write
Yeah.
about it. Now it's different for you, obviously, because like you said, you had that PTSD struggle. So when you write PTSD, you know exactly what it is. But I'm
Right.
sure there's things in your book, like you've never been to space, I assume, but you can
No,
do
I've
research.
never stolen anything, but my main character is a thief.
Right.
So, you know,
Right. And there's plenty of resources out there for anyone who's struggling to write what you know. The the internet is not a small place. You can find
no.
information. You can find information. What so when you, is your book Reliance, your book series, I guess. What's the name of the series?
It's the Reliance
Oh,
trilogy.
okay. Uh, is that set in our world in the distant future, or is it a completely made up universe?
It's based in reality. The majority of what happens is not taking place on Earth.
Okay.
But it's a future where we've moved from Earth to these other planets, and still dealing with a lot of the same issues that we deal with now here on this planet, like oppression and,
Yeah.
um, you know, social classes and systemic racism. All of that stuff is still applicable even in this outside universe.
Yeah. I think it's really sad. I mean, I think what you did's right, but like, the struggles we encounter now, they were the struggles 2,000 years ago. They're going to be the
Yeah.
struggle in the future. It's really sad, and we can make it into it. We can, but it's going to be difficult. Um, when you sat down and you said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." People are at different planets. Obviously, you have to build those planets. You have to make those worlds. But what else were you doing whenever you sat down and said, "I have to make a cool world"? How can I go about doing that? What was that
It
process
was
like?
it was the world, and it was the people who were going to be populating it. It was sitting down and coming up with different alien races that would make sense to be kind of living together. Um, it was a lot of plotting and figuring out kind of with the story I wanted to tell how I could make it make sense.
Yeah.
Um, and there are a lot of different alien races that I kind of came up with, but then also used kind of things that I knew and had done research on. So it was just a lot of sitting down and figuring out
Okay.
what made the most sense in this world.
Did you always know it was going to be more than one book?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that helps. I'm sure that helped
Yeah.
with what are you going to do in book two? Like it helps it helps to know there was always going to be a book two. Um, do you have anything else in the works that you are maybe not allowed to give too many details about?
Um, well, I now am writing book three of the trilogy,
Okay.
which will
So book two's
bring
done?
everything. Book two's done.
Okay.
I will be doing edits with my publisher over the next few months, and the goal would be to get the book out there for people to read before the end of the year.
Okay.
So book two is done, just a matter of editing and getting it nice and pretty for the world. Book three, I'm starting now
Wow.
and working on.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's the thing about writing a trilogy is it's like you have all these ideas of how you're going to get to the end, but like that last book is so important. It's so pivotal in the
Ah,
story, and
it's the end.
it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Uh, yeah. I mean, it's the end. You have to do it. Book two is called Defiant.
Disobedience.
Disobedience. I don't know where that came from. Disobedient. I'm sorry. Book one's Reliance. We're at about an hour, so I want to kind of wrap it up a little bit. You said you're from Oregon.
Yes.
If people were going to come visit, where would you take them? What are some places you're like, hey, this is cool. We have to go here.
I I've lived here my whole life and I still don't really feel like I'm one of those Oregonians who like knows all the cool secret
Oh,
places.
you got to go exploring. Well, you have a daughter now, so obviously you're going to take her exploring eventually, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly. I think downtown Portland, the market that they have there on the weekends
Okay.
is one of my favorite places to go. It kind of reminds me of Comic-Con in the sense, not that there's a bunch of people dressed up
Oh,
and
I was really excited.
which is awesome, and I love Comic-Con, but there's so much creativity there, and people are selling the coolest, artistic things, like art that I've seen, purses made out of old board games. Like there's
Oh,
just
that's
so much
cool.
stuff out there to go and see and do. So I always recommend the market in downtown Portland. Um, we're such a unique little place. Like you really can throw a stone and hit like five different things, like a really cool vintage bookstore or a vintage clothing store. So just going into downtown Portland and exploring kind of like Old Town Chinatown and the Pearl District, there's so much stuff that you can see and do down there. But Oregon also has like the Oregon Caves. They have a safari where you can go and see animals. Oregon is one of those really cool states where you can kind of do anything. There's a beach, there's mountains, so you can snowboard, you can go out into the forest and get lost for a while. We have really great hiking trails, waterfalls. It's just kind of like anything you would want to do, we have it. And the possibilities are kind of endless.
That's really cool. It sounds like
But I will say try Voodoo Donuts. That's kind of the go-to
the Voodoo
place.
Donuts, that thing.
Voodoo Donuts.
Look, it sounds like you have a wonderful place to live.
It's great.
You have a healthy, wonderful daughter. You're putting out books. You have a good job. Sounds like you have a good life going on right now.
I do. It's pretty
Yeah.
ideal.
You have a supportive husband who corrects all your science errors. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a good job. You have a good gig going on. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone, disobedience. Which
Disobedience.
disobedience come out hopefully by the end of the year, right?
Yep.
Keep an eye out for that. Reliance you can get now, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, yeah,
And Audible.
and Audible. Guys, check it out. Be sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you can see when more videos go up, and definitely check out the wonderful books by Kaitlyn here because they're going to be amazing. And yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good day.